All right, so we're going to continue on with our soil science unit with learning targets 10 through 12, which is going to be soil purposes and the land capability classes, which will give way to your next big project to wrap up this week. All right, so some uses of soil. So soil can be used, in two major ways, and we can break them down into two major ways. Those ways are agricultural uses and non-agricultural uses. So some agricultural uses of soil. First is be cropland. Okay, so you got two different types of cropland. You got annual crops and perennial crops. It can be an erosion issue if certain methods are not used properly. Okay, like crop rotation. That's a great example of an annual crop, and you change it every year um, to help keep the soil in place. Another agricultural use is grazing. So rangeland is native grasses and shrubs in a particular area. Vast quantities of these grasslands and rangelands are needed for adequate grazing, and management is a big issue here as well. Overcrowding is a bad thing. Overgrazing is a bad thing, which will lead to erosion as well. Okay? Overeating, overgrazing of native grasses and shrubs destroys root systems, which are used to help hold the soil in place, which that will allow that top soil layer or that those first two layers of the soil profile to be eroded away. All right, so another agricultural use is forest. So this would be a perennial, example of cropland, um, agroforestry, or a silviculture, least destructive to the soil, but there are still concerns. One of the concerns is when it's time to harvest, say the timber in the area, the logging equipment can cause damage to the soil, but that is once every 10 to 20 years, if not longer than that in some situations. So there are concerns with how those pieces of machinery are used, but the soil is relatively undisturbed for the most part during this process, or during the process of growing forest, not harvesting. All right, agriculture uses. So, urban agriculture. This is a huge trend that is growing in popularity across the United States. There's a small scale farms in the middle of the city or on rooftops of buildings. We see a lot of examples of this. Um, Big thing there is the soil must be taken care of. It's not natural in that area. There's not going to be natural ways to replenish nutrients that are lost. So that is something that has to be, taken care of by humans, especially when there's some uh, small scale farms or rooftop farms that are placed in an area that are not naturally supposed to be there. It is possible, but there are management techniques that need to be done. So some non-agricultural uses. Okay, recreation. So we're talking about parks, ball fields, golf courses. This all includes turf grass management. So there's also some natural resources, hunting and fishing. And we talked about with the soil erosion unit that or learning target that fishing can be impacted by soil erosion. If that soil runs off into water sources and it pollutes the water, which could have an effect on the fish population. Construction, so the soil must support whatever is going to be put on it. So the soil's load bearing capacity, is the soil able to stand up to whatever's being built on it? So where it goes back to the soil texture lab that we did a couple days ago, learning about and being able to detect and classify the types of soil that you're building on will play a humongous role into can that structure be supported not just short term but long term. What is that soil going to do? Most soils have what's called a shrink and swell potential. As they get wet, soils will swell, and just like most things when they get wet. And as they dry out, they'll shrink. So is this potential going to be detrimental to a structure that's built on it, or is it just a small change between the two? It's important to understand that before construction can happen in an area. Waste disposal, so landfills can be an environmental issue. Um, you get leaching. You can get soils used as a filter for waste or sewage, and leaching will allow things to or substances to end up in an area that they don't belong, which will lead to pollution. All right, so this is a 2007 graph of the land use in the United States. You see that there's a lot of forest land used, and there's a lot of range land, and a lot of cropland. All right, so the land capability classes. So there's 8 land capability classes, with 1 being the least restrictive and 8 being the most restrictive. So class 1. So this can be this land classification can be cropped, it can be pastured, and it can be managed for woodlands and wildlife. Has good water holding capacity, relatively flat and well drained, and this is the best type of land for growing crops. Class number 2, there's gentle slopes, typically between 2% and 6% grade. The moderate erosion hazards, not extreme, but there are some risk. There's normally shallow topsoil, slightly poor drainage, and this is also suitable for all uses, but not as well as class number 1. Class number 3, moderately steep slopes between 6 to 12%. There is a high erosion risk, poor drainage, very shallow topsoil, unstable structure, and special conservation methods are needed for growing crops. Class number 4, row crops cannot be grown in this particular land class. Slopes are extremely steep, 12 to 18%. Cover crops are best, and erosion controls must be practiced. So there has to be management techniques put in to prevent erosion here. Class number 5. These land classifications are unsuitable for cultivation. Can be used for range, pasture land, woodlands, or recreation. This is limited by flooding, rockiness, or short growing seasons. Class number 6, same as class 5, with the steep slope of being 18 to 30%. Class number 7 and class number 8, relatively unsuitable for production, preserved only for recreation, wildlife, or beauty. Some examples: sandy beaches, rock outcroppings, and flooded river bottoms. And that is the end of this video. So be sure you complete the video form and look for your virtual land capability project that is coming your way in the next couple of days. If you have questions, please let me know. Thank you.